Manvel, Texas, September 10th, 1990. Just after midnight, a long-haul truck driver spotted something strange along a quiet stretch of County Road 101. In the glare of his headlights lay a human skull, half buried in weeds. Beside it, a blue stone ring caught the light, shining bright against the dust and bone. Within minutes, deputies swarmed the roadside, their flashlights cutting across the dark fields, crime scene tape fluttering in the Texas wind. News of the discovery spread quickly. Who was this young woman, left alone in the night, with nothing but a ring to mark her existence? Was she someone's missing daughter, a runaway, or the victim of something far more sinister? For decades, she would be known only as Princess Blue. 30 years passed before science finally gave her back her name. But the truth of what happened that night still lies hidden in the silence of the fields. This is one of Texas's most haunting cold cases, a story of mystery, heartbreak, and the relentless search for justice. If you care about true crime, if you want to help keep these stories alive, don't forget to subscribe, follow our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next case we uncover. Manvel, Texas, September 10th, 1990. The night hung heavy along the stretch of highway just outside town, where the asphalt ribboned through open fields and the air felt thick with secrets. The only movement was a long-haul truck, headlights blazing, tires humming like a restless heart. It was just after midnight. The driver, worn from hours on the road, tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, the radio whispering low country music as a warm wind snuck through a cracked window. Then, a flash of something pale, out of place, caught in the glare. He hit the brakes, tires screeching against the dark hush of rural Texas. The truck rumbled to a stop on the gravel shoulder. Heart pounding, the driver leaned forward, peering through the windshield into the patch of overgrown weeds and wildflowers that lined the ditch. There, half buried in dirt and tangled grass, was a skull bleached white by sun and time. A blue stone, set in a ring, sparkled beside it, impossibly bright against the bones and dust. For a moment, time held its breath. The trucker's hands shook as he grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the muggy night, gravel crunching beneath his boots. The air was thick with the scent of rain that never came and the ghostly hush of fields asleep. He knelt close, the beam of light dancing over the skull's hollow eye sockets and jaw locked in an eternal scream. There was no mistaking what this was. No hope of it being anything other than a silent, tragic marker left behind by someone who never wanted to be found. A chill traced his spine as the truth dawned. Someone had abandoned a young woman here, alone in the dark, as if her existence was a secret meant to be buried forever. The blue stone on her finger glinted in the flashlight's beam, silent but demanding to be noticed, as if it held the memory of the life it once belonged to. Who was she? Who left her here, far from the lights and noise of the city? The trucker's mind spun through stories, tales he'd heard in roadside diners about missing girls, small-town gossip, people who simply vanished into the long Texan night. He backed away, fumbled for his cell phone, and dialed 911 with shaking fingers, the weight of what he'd found pressing down on him with every breath. When the dispatcher answered, his voice trembled, a hoarse whisper barely cutting through the static. "You need to send someone. I found something. It's a body. A skull." Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights tore through the darkness, shattering the silence as sheriff's deputies arrived. The once quiet highway transformed into a hive of activity. Patrol cars lining the shoulder, radios crackling, crime scene tape unfurling like a warning against the wild weeds. Officers fanned out, boots sinking into the wet earth as they cordoned off the scene, flashlights probing every shadow. Cameras clicked, capturing the haunting sight. A young woman's remains, marked only by the blue stone ring she still wore. In the distance, the fields lay undisturbed, moonlight silvering the tops of the grass, as if the land itself mourned for what was lost. The sheriff, a man with tired eyes and a deep-set frown, knelt by the bones. He brushed dirt away from the ring with gloved hands, studying it. A delicate band, cheap metal, but the blue stone gleamed like a drop of sky. It was a detail, a clue, but it was also heartbreak. The ring didn't belong in the dirt. It belonged on the finger of someone with a story, someone whose dreams should have carried her far from this lonely place. News of the discovery traveled fast, faster than the wind, spreading through Manvel and out into Houston, rippling through late-night diners, gas stations, and quiet living rooms where televisions flickered with the local news. Speculation grew wild. Who was she? Was she someone's missing daughter, a runaway, or a victim of something much darker? The town buzzed with whispered theories, suspicion curling like smoke around every shadowy figure and unfamiliar car. The blue ring became the centerpiece of the mystery, an object as unforgettable as it was heartbreaking. It wasn't expensive, just costume jewelry, maybe bought at a flea market or a strip mall boutique. But in the gloom of that night, it shone with a terrible importance. Reporters dubbed her Princess Blue, a name that stuck because no one knew her real one. The crime scene photos, skull, bones, blue ring, appeared in newspapers, on TV, and in the hushed tones of mothers warning daughters to be careful after dark. For investigators, the night was just the beginning. They combed the area for evidence, sifted through soil for scraps of clothing, jewelry, anything that might tell them who she was or how she ended up here. Hours stretched into dawn, but the only answers they found were questions, the kind that clung to the shadows and refused to let go. The sheriff stood at the edge of the field, watching as the first pink blush of morning spread across the sky. He knew, deep down, that this case would haunt Manvel for years to come. There would be theories, wild leads, and maybe even confessions. But the real story, the truth behind the blue ring and the bones, remained hidden, just out of reach. And so the question hung in the humid Texas air, echoing in the hearts of everyone who heard about the girl with the blue ring. Who left this young woman here, abandoned like a secret meant to be buried forever? The answer, for now, was swallowed by the silence of the fields, waiting for someone brave enough to dig up the truth. Long before her name became just another cold headline, Melissa Carter was simply a young woman navigating the tightrope between ambition and survival in late 1980s Houston. She was 20, slender, with a gentle, angular face framed by long brown hair that caught the light when she moved. In the city's endless swirl of neon, she seemed both fragile and determined, like a dandelion pushing through a crack in the pavement. Melissa lived in a cramped apartment on the second floor of a worn-out complex, squeezed between a busy avenue and the lingering scent of fried food from a diner below. Her window overlooked the city's restless pulse, fluorescent signs blinking outside, shadows sliding over faded wallpaper. Inside, the world was smaller but filled with private hope. A sewing machine humming in the corner, fabric scraps spilling from laundry baskets, sketches of dresses taped to the refrigerator. The apartment told her story without a word. On her dresser, rings glittered in cheap metal and imitation stones, a small collection built piece by piece from flea markets and clearance racks. Each ring held its own memory. A birthday, a first paycheck, a promise to herself that someday she'd wear something real, something earned. But Melissa's favorite was always the same, a delicate band with a bright blue stone, like a sliver of Texas sky caught in silver. She wore it almost every day, spinning it absent-mindedly on her finger as she dreamed of the future. By day, Houston was a city of opportunity, shimmering with possibility for those willing to hustle. By night, it transformed into something harder, darker, more dangerous. Melissa knew the risks. Her mother reminded her constantly, warnings sharpened by worry. But Melissa's world was too small for fear. She worked double shifts at a coffee shop just off Westheimer, pouring lattes for businessmen, night owls, and college kids, her mind drifting toward patterns and colors even as she scrubbed counters and counted tips. Late nights became a routine. Sometimes she'd take the bus home drowsy and sore, clutching her purse close, watching strangers' faces reflected in the windows. Other times, she'd walk, city lights casting long shadows that made her seem even smaller. But always, when she arrived at her door, there was relief, a sanctuary of thread, sketches, and quiet ambition. Melissa's dream was clear and fierce, to design clothes that made people feel special, to move beyond the grind of minimum wage, to one day open her own little boutique. She'd grown up on hand-me-downs, watching her mother patch and hem worn dresses to fit her and her sister. She learned the feel of fabric, the language of seams, the thrill of making something out of nothing. Her notebooks were filled with drawings, gowns, blouses, bold shapes and colors that didn't exist in her world but might, someday, if she just kept working. But Houston, for all its sparkle, held shadows. In the late 1980s, the city buzzed with promise and danger. Murders flickered across TV screens with the same frequency as football scores. Headlines spoke of women gone missing, bodies found in bayous, police investigations that faded as quickly as they flared. Melissa tried not to pay attention, but sometimes the stories seeped through. A friend of a friend who vanished, a coworker who'd heard screams near the train tracks. Each story was a quiet threat, a reminder that life could change in an instant. Still, Melissa moved forward. She found beauty where she could. Scraps of lace at thrift stores, old magazines filled with dreams, laughter shared over late-night pizza with her younger sister. Her circle was small but solid. Her mother, tired but loving, who worked long hours as a nurse. Her 10-year-old sister, bright-eyed and eager, who looked up to Melissa like she was made of stardust. A few friends from work who talked big dreams over coffee, promising each other that things would be different one day. Those nights, as she cleaned up after closing, Melissa would watch the world outside the shop window. The city seemed both infinite and claustrophobic, beautiful and cruel. Somewhere out there, she believed, was a place for her. A better apartment, a closet filled with real dresses, maybe even a little studio with her name on the door. She wore her blue ring as a quiet promise to herself, a reminder that she was more than tips and shifts, that something brighter waited on the other side of struggle. Sometimes, she'd stare at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, seeing not just the tired lines under her eyes, but the determination that refused to be dulled. She was too young for regret, too hungry for the life she'd imagined. She kept going, one sketch, one stitch, one night at a time. Outside, Houston thrummed and roared, the city's dual nature always present, light and shadow, promise and peril. Melissa Carter lived in the space between, her dreams shining just as fiercely as the blue stone on her finger. In the quiet moments, when the city's noise faded and only her heart remained, she told herself, "One day, they'll know my name, not as a headline but as someone who made something beautiful out of the darkness." But the future is a fickle thing, and in Houston's endless night, even the brightest dreams can vanish before dawn. By July of 1990, the heat in Houston clung to everything, turning the city into a simmering cauldron that pressed down on the lives within it. Melissa Carter, despite her exhaustion, felt a small thrill as she slipped the blue ring onto her finger that evening. Her mother watched from the doorway, worry lines etched deep into her brow. "I'll be home before midnight," Melissa promised, flashing a smile, the blue stone catching the hallway light as if it could ward off the darkness waiting beyond the apartment door. Melissa's plans that night weren't unusual. A birthday party for a friend at a bar downtown, the kind of gathering that always seemed more glamorous in anticipation than in reality. Still, it was an escape, a brief chance to forget the monotony of coffee shop shifts and relentless bills. She dressed with care, a touch of eyeliner to make her brown eyes stand out, a dress she'd hemmed herself to fit just right, and her hair loose, falling over her shoulders in soft waves. The city buzzed with energy as she caught the bus, neon lights flickering past the windows, other riders lost in their own worlds. The bar was loud and crowded, filled with the scent of beer, perfume, and anticipation. Melissa moved through the room with a kind of hopeful grace, laughing with friends, her eyes always searching for something beyond the haze of small talk. The night passed in flashes, birthday candles, a toast to dreams, promises whispered over cheap cocktails. It was easy to lose track of time, even easier to let the city's dangers fade into the background when surrounded by familiar faces. But as the clock ticked toward midnight, reality crept back in. Melissa glanced at her watch, mentally calculating the bus schedule and dreading the walk from the stop to her apartment. She hugged her friends goodbye, the celebration already dissolving into memory, and stepped outside into the sticky summer night. Streetlights flickered overhead, casting pools of yellow over cracked sidewalks and the gleam of passing cars. It was then that Melissa noticed the blue Camaro idling near the curb, a car she'd seen before, though the driver remained just a shadowy figure at the edge of her memory. Some said he was a regular at the bar, others only knew him as a face in the crowd. Tonight, he waited, engine rumbling, windows rolled down to let in the night air. As Melissa walked past, he called out something, maybe her name, maybe a casual offer of a ride. Witnesses later remembered seeing her pause, her silhouette outlined against the glow of the bar's neon sign. There was no fear in her body language, only a moment's hesitation, the kind that haunts memories when the outcome is already known. She leaned in, exchanged a few quiet words, her blue ring glinting as she tucked her hair behind her ear. It was nothing out of the ordinary for a city girl used to navigating attention and danger, used to weighing risk with every step. And yet, as the music from the bar faded behind her and the night pressed closer, Melissa was last seen beside the blue Camaro. The man's features were indistinct, a blur in the recollections of those who noticed but did not intervene. Some would later swear she got into the car. Others insisted she merely stood talking, arms crossed, as if deciding whether to trust the offer. The truth was as slippery as the summer air, each detail morphing with the retelling. In the days to come, this moment would become the focal point for every theory, every hope and regret. But in that instant, as the lights of the bar receded, Melissa disappeared into the dark. Her dreams, her fears, and her future swallowed whole by the night. The city continued on, unaware. Cars sped past, horns blared, laughter echoed from open windows. Somewhere, Melissa's mother fell asleep in front of the television, the late news murmuring half-remembered stories of crime and heartbreak. Her younger sister clutched a stuffed bear, dreaming of grown-up adventures and not yet knowing the shape of loss. For Melissa, there was only the unknown. No one saw where she went after that. No camera caught her final steps. No witness remembered her last words. The night closed in, drawing a curtain over her story, turning a vibrant young woman into a question mark that would haunt her family and city for decades. In the hours that followed, the blue Camaro vanished into the labyrinth of Houston's roads, taillights flickering like distant stars. Melissa Carter's absence would not be felt until morning, when the world woke to the slow realization that sometimes people simply disappear, leaving behind only whispers, empty spaces, and the echo of promises never kept. Morning in Houston always arrived with a jolt, a blaring alarm, the first clatter of breakfast dishes, the city's endless hum seeping in through thin apartment walls. But on this day, something felt different. The Carter apartment was too quiet, heavy with the absence of routine sounds. Melissa's mother, usually bustling around before her nursing shift, woke to a chill. Her daughter's bed was still neatly made, untouched. The blue ring she always wore was gone from the dresser, but Melissa herself had not returned. At first, worry tiptoed in on silent feet. Maybe Melissa had stayed out with friends, fallen asleep on someone's couch. But as the hours crawled by and no call came, worry bloomed into fear. The day stretched into evening. The phone sat silent, each minute amplifying a mother's dread. Melissa's little sister watched the door, eyes wide and hopeful, clutching a handmade birthday card she'd meant to give her that morning. The family's dog paced restlessly, unsettled by the change. By noon, Melissa's mother was calling anyone she could think of, friends, co-workers, even the manager at the coffee shop. Each conversation left her more unsettled. No one had seen Melissa. No one knew where she'd gone after the party. By dusk, reality set in with the sharpness of shattered glass. Melissa Carter was missing, and every second counted. Her mother sprang into action. She printed out copies of the most recent photo, Melissa in a sundress, smiling at the camera, blue ring bright on her hand. She taped the photos to neon flyers, the words "missing" and "please help" in bold black marker. With her youngest daughter by her side, she walked block after block, covering street lamps and utility poles with Melissa's face. Rain threatened, but she pressed on, her hands trembling as she secured each flyer with strips of clear tape. Every stranger who passed became both a potential threat and a potential hope. Neighbors emerged from behind curtains, whispering questions and half-formed theories. Some offered comfort. Others only fueled the rumors. Was Melissa abducted by someone lurking in the shadows? Or had she run away with a secret lover? Was she hiding from something? Or had something terrible found her? Each answer seemed less likely than the last, but hope clung to every word, every possibility. As the sun set, the neighborhood changed. What once felt familiar now seemed fraught with menace, shadows pooling beneath stairwells, headlights flickering in the distance. The Carter family's living room became a war room, Stacks of flyers, a notepad covered with phone numbers, a map of Houston with circles drawn around the bar, the bus stop, the stretch of road where Melissa was last seen. Her mother left the porch light burning through the night, refusing to let the darkness win. News spread quickly. Local reporters caught wind of the missing girl. Within days, headlines appeared. Houston girl vanishes after night out. Her photograph, the same hopeful smile, filled screens and newspapers. Melissa's name was on everyone's lips. At the coffee shop, co-workers gathered in anxious clusters, replaying the last night she'd worked. Every detail now suspicious, every memory laced with guilt. Should they have walked her home? Was there something in her voice they'd missed? The family organized a candlelight vigil on the second night. Friends, neighbors, and strangers gathered outside the apartment, each holding a flickering candle against the night. Melissa's 10-year-old sister stood in the center, face streaked with tears, her small hands clutching the blue-ringed candle her mother had given her. The glow cast trembling shadows, each one a fragile hope that Melissa would come home. Through the silence, prayers rose, some whispered, some choked with grief. Melissa's mother stood tall, voice wavering, but clear as she begged the city not to forget her daughter, not to let her fade into the background noise of crime statistics and unsolved cases. The crowd joined in, a fragile army against the darkness. The police circulated through the crowd, promising to do all they could, but their eyes told a different story. One of too many cases and too few answers. For the Carter family, each hour stretched into an eternity. Nights bled into mornings, hope mingled with despair. Melissa's room remained untouched, a museum of dreams, a half-finished dress draped over the sewing machine, a stack of sketches waiting for color, the faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. Her little sister tiptoed inside, running her fingers over the blue ring she'd found in Melissa's jewelry box, wishing for a magic that would bring her back. The neighborhood held its breath. Parents kept children close. Teenagers traded warnings at bus stops, and shopkeepers glanced nervously at every unfamiliar face. Melissa's story became a cautionary tale, a headline, and a wound that would not close. For her family, every knock on the door, every phone call, brought a fresh surge of hope and dread. Days passed, then weeks. Flyers weathered in the rain, their edges curling and colors fading, but the hope they represented remained stubborn. The Carter family refused to give up. Every night, Melissa's mother stood by the window, searching the darkness for headlights that might bring her daughter home. The vigil candles melted into stubs, but the family's faith burned on, even as the world around them grew colder and more uncertain. In Houston, another name joined the list of the missing. But for one family, one little sister, one community, the loss was not just a headline. It was a gaping wound, a reminder that even in a city of millions, a single vanished girl could leave the whole world feeling empty. The investigation into Melissa Carter's disappearance unfolded quickly at first, fueled by urgency and the community's collective anxiety. Detectives moved in, notebooks in hand, tracing her final hours with methodical determination. The process was routine but heavy, every detail carrying the weight of a family's hope and a city's fear. The bar where Melissa was last seen became the center of the investigation, its neon signs now a stark reminder of the night she vanished. Officers canvassed the area, questioning bartenders, patrons, and anyone who might have seen the young woman leave. The bartender remembered her, friendly, quiet, always careful with her tips. A friend described the way she'd glanced at the clock, her promise to her mother echoing in her mind as the party wound down. But beyond these fragments, certainty faded. Memory was unreliable under neon lights and the influence of alcohol. The details grew soft at the edges. Through pieced-together accounts, detectives reconstructed a timeline. Melissa left the bar around 11:15 p.m., alone. Outside, the air was thick with humidity and anticipation, the city's nightlife in full swing. It was then that the blue Camaro, already the subject of whispered speculation, emerged as a focal point. Several witnesses mentioned the car, a classic model, paint dulled by age, driven by a man with brown hair. Some remembered him circling the block. Others swore he'd waited near the curb. He was older than Melissa. That much everyone agreed on. His presence had always been on the periphery, never part of the party, but always there, eyes scanning the crowd. Witnesses recalled a brief exchange outside the bar. Melissa, purse in hand, hesitated beside the Camaro. A quick conversation, nervous glances. One woman described the way the man leaned closer, voice low, too soft to overhear. Detectives tracked down the car's owner, a man with a string of traffic violations, but no violent record. They brought him in for questioning, the atmosphere in the small, windowless interrogation room thick with tension. The man was calm, almost practiced, as he recounted his version of the night. He denied giving Melissa a ride, denied knowing her beyond what anyone might know from seeing a regular at the same bar. His answers were smooth, measured, each word chosen with care. He'd gone home alone, he insisted, and had nothing to hide. But the detectives pressed on. They asked about the timeline, probed for inconsistencies, watched for the slightest twitch of discomfort. The silence in the room became a wall, thick, impenetrable, each unanswered question echoing back at them. There were no witnesses who'd seen Melissa enter the car, no video footage, no physical evidence tying the man to her disappearance, just rumors, fleeting impressions, and the gnawing sense that something vital was slipping through their fingers. Outside the station, the city continued its restless churn. Reporters clustered near the police tape, hungry for updates, headlines ready to print. The Carter family waited by the phone, hope eroding with each passing hour. Melissa's mother replayed the last conversation over and over, clinging to every detail. Her sister clung to the faintest hope. Her world narrowed to the space between their front door and the telephone. Investigators retraced every step, checking security cameras, cross-referencing alibis, knocking on doors late into the night. The blue Camaro became the city's ghost, a specter that haunted the investigation. They searched the car, found nothing. A faint trace of perfume, perhaps, but nothing they could prove belonged to Melissa. The man's home was spotless, his story consistent. Rumors swirled in the community, gaining momentum with each retelling. Some claimed the Camaro's driver had a history with missing girls. Others insisted he was just a convenient scapegoat. Old wounds and old secrets surfaced. The investigation cast a wide net, but the city was too large, its shadows too deep. Each promising lead ended the same way, inconclusive, frustrating, and empty. For detectives, the sense of futility grew. Every question led to another dead end. Every hunch faded in the light of day. They called in experts, consulted behavioral analysts, pored over similar cases. Patterns emerged, but none that fit Melissa perfectly. The investigation became a labyrinth, hope narrowing with each wrong turn. The interrogation room, once a place of possibility, became a symbol of frustration. The suspect sat with folded arms, confidence never wavering. He answered every question, then returned to his life as if nothing had changed. The wall of silence was complete. No witnesses, no evidence, just a young woman who vanished and a community left behind in the echo of her absence. As the weeks stretched on, the urgency that once propelled the investigation began to wane. Other crimes demanded attention. Headlines shifted to newer tragedies. Melissa's face, once ubiquitous, faded from the news cycle. The Carter family found themselves fighting to keep her memory alive, organizing vigils, pleading for tips, refusing to let the city move on. But beneath the surface, the pain persisted, a silent current running through every unanswered question, every restless night. The detectives kept Melissa's file open, hoping for a break. The suspect's name remained circled in red ink, a reminder that sometimes the truth hides just out of reach, masked by smooth denials and the absence of proof. And so, the silence endured, pressing down on the city and all who loved her. A wall between justice and oblivion, built one unanswered question at a time. Time is cruelest to the families left behind. For the Carter family, days without answers bled into weeks, and weeks collapsed into months, until the urgency of the investigation faded into a gnawing, endless ache. The city of Houston moved on. Headlines changed. Reporters chased new tragedies. But for those who loved Melissa, every day was the same. Absence woven into the fabric of ordinary life. The missing flyers, once bright and urgent, with Melissa's smiling face and hopeful eyes, turned brittle in the sun. Rain streaked the ink. The pages curled and yellowed. Some were ripped down, others simply ignored. The world was noisy, full of new disasters and old routines. For Melissa's family, there was only quiet, a cold silence settling into the corners of their home. Her mother became a ghost in her own life. She moved through the apartment with the heavy mechanical steps of someone holding her breath for too long. Every morning, she visited the family altar, a shelf crowded with faded photographs, a dried bouquet, and the blue ring that Melissa had loved so much. On Melissa's birthday, her mother placed the ring on the altar, lighting a single candle that flickered weakly in the dim room. She whispered prayers into the flame, her voice thin with hope and regret, willing her daughter to find her way home. Melissa's little sister grew quieter. She drew pictures of the three of them, always together, always smiling, refusing to add herself to the world of the missing. Her world shrank to the safety of her bedroom and the hope that, somehow, Melissa would return. At school, teachers spoke in hushed voices, eyes soft with pity, as if the loss might be contagious. Friends drifted away, unsure of what to say or how to act. The silence wrapped around her, heavy and unyielding. For the police, Melissa's case became another folder in a growing stack. Detectives came and went, leaving behind cryptic notes and faint pencil marks on timelines that no longer mattered. Leads dried up, witnesses moved on, memories faded. The blue Camaro became just another rumor, its significance drowned by time and the city's relentless churn. Every so often, a tip would surface. A sighting, a confession, a wild theory, but each one ended the same way, with disappointment, frustration, and a deeper sense of futility. Years passed. The Carter family marked birthdays and holidays with empty chairs and half-remembered laughter. Melissa's room remained frozen in time, her sewing machine collecting dust, sketches curling at the edges. The faint scent of her perfume lingered on the pillow, a haunting reminder of all that was lost. Her mother refused to change anything, as if preserving the past might somehow summon Melissa back. Some nights, when the city was quiet and the world seemed to hold its breath, Melissa's mother lit the blue ring candle again. The tiny flame flickered bravely, casting shadows that danced on the walls. Shadows that looked for a moment like a young woman returning home, like hope refusing to die. Outside, the world was indifferent, but within those walls, the struggle against forgetting was fierce and stubborn. The community, too, felt the slow creep of silence. For a while, people kept their doors locked. Parents called their children home before dark. Neighbors watched out for each other with renewed suspicion. But over time, vigilance gave way to fatigue, and Melissa's story faded into legend. A cautionary tale told to new arrivals, a warning passed along with house keys and whispered in the dark. The city's memory grew foggy, details slipping away, until all that remained was a name and a blue ring. Yet the silence was not complete. Every so often, someone would pause at an old flyer, catch a glimpse of Melissa's eyes in a photo, and wonder what became of the girl who vanished. Candlelight vigils dwindled but never disappeared entirely. Each year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, a small group gathered, family, a few faithful friends, strangers who refused to let go. They stood beneath the yellowing glow of street lamps, candles trembling in the wind, promising that Melissa would not be forgotten. In those quiet moments, grief took on a new shape. It was not the sharp, frantic pain of early loss, but something colder, heavier, a slow freezing of hope, a desperate clinging to memory. Melissa's mother spoke less, but her determination only grew stronger. She joined support groups for families of the missing, wrote letters to police chiefs, and fought for Melissa's case to be reopened. Each effort was a blow against the silence, a refusal to surrender. But the world had moved on. There were new faces on the news, new heartbreaks demanding attention. For the Carter family, the hardest part was the sense that Melissa had become a ghost, not just in their home, but in the world beyond. Her dreams, her laughter, her love, all reduced to a single haunting image, a lone candle trembling in the dark, fighting against the shadows of forgetting. And so the years slipped by, leaving the Carter family suspended between hope and despair, caught in the cold case silence, waiting, always waiting, for the day the phone would ring and the world would remember Melissa Carter once more. Autumn settled across the outskirts of Manvel, Texas, wrapping the highway in a hush broken only by passing trucks and the lonely whistle of wind through grass. 2 months after Melissa Carter's disappearance, the fields near County Road 101 stood quiet, the land bearing silent witness to secrets buried just beneath the surface. Hunters searching for deer wandered the shoulder, eyes scanning for movement among the weeds and tangled underbrush. It was the chill in the air that brought the discovery. A glint in the dirt caught one hunter's attention. Unexpected, out of place. Stooping low, he brushed aside brittle grass and sun-baked soil, and what emerged shifted the air from ordinary to ominous. First a fragment of bone, smooth and pale as driftwood, then a jaw, teeth clenched as if holding back a story too terrible to tell. The hunter's breath turned cold as he realized what he'd stumbled upon. Remains that didn't belong to the natural order. Remains that cried out for justice, even in silence. Within hours, the scene was flooded with law enforcement. their boots pressing new patterns into the muddy earth. The news of a body found on the roadside spread quickly. Radio crackling in squad cars, phone calls made with trembling hands. Yellow tape cordoned off the patch of ground, and investigators combed through the grass with the care reserved for precious relics. What they found among the bones told a story all its own. Near the remains lay a collection of rings, their metal dulled but their stones still shining beneath the pale sunlight. The blue ring was there, Melissa's blue ring, unmistakable, its color like a drop of sky in a world gone gray. Alongside it was another, a 1975 high school class ring, large, masculine, set with a sapphire blue stone. It seemed to whisper of another life, another set of secrets, its inscription nearly worn away by time and weather. Detectives pieced together every scrap of evidence, the mystery growing stranger by the minute. The location, remote, overgrown, too far for someone to stumble upon by accident. The rings, tokens of memory and identity, left behind or discarded, each carrying a hidden meaning. Forensic teams gathered soil samples, photographed the site from every angle, wrapped the skeletal remains in shrouds of evidence bags. Reporters gathered at the highway's edge, their questions echoing the ones already haunting the Carter family and police alike. No one could say for sure how long the body had lain there, exposed to the elements and forgotten by the world. But the blue ring brought everything rushing back. Melissa's story, which had faded to a whisper, surged forward again with urgent clarity. The blue ring, once just a piece of costume jewelry, now shimmered with the weight of tragedy and hope. Proof that Melissa had not simply vanished, that her fate was tied to this lonely patch of Texas soil. The class ring was a twist no one expected. Who did it belong to? Was it left as a message or simply lost in the struggle that ended a life? Investigators followed this new lead, digging through yearbooks, interviewing teachers and alumni from area high schools. The inscription yielded a partial name, an initial, a mascot worn by hundreds of graduates over the years. Each possibility led to more questions, not answers. With no DNA technology advanced enough at the time, Melissa's identity remained hidden. The case files thickened as reports came in: missing persons, runaway girls, young women who fit the vague description of the remains. Each one was a possibility, each one a heartbreak for families desperate for closure. The remains became known in police reports and news headlines as Princess Blue, a name conjured from the shining ring found at her side. It was easier, somehow, to give the tragedy a name, even if it was not her own. But names alone did not heal wounds or close cases. The blue ring, so small and bright, seemed to mock the detectives' efforts, an answer forever on the tip of the tongue, never spoken aloud. The class ring, too, became an artifact of speculation. Did Melissa know its owner? Had it been a gift, or a clue, or merely a coincidence lost in the chaos of a night gone wrong? In the community, whispers began anew. The story of the missing girl and the rings found beside her remains grew into legend. Parents looked at their children with fresh worry, warning them not to trust rides from strangers, not to linger after dark. Candlelight vigils resumed, flickering in defiance of the years that had tried to erase Melissa's memory. For the Carter family, the new clue brought a strange mixture of hope and dread. The blue ring meant answers were closer, but also meant their worst fears might soon be realized. Melissa's mother returned to the altar, lighting a candle that burned deep into the night, its flame reflected in the faceted blue stone now immortalized in newspaper photographs. Her little sister clutched an old drawing, heart heavy with the knowledge that somewhere, the truth was waiting to be unearthed. And yet, for all the evidence recovered, for all the stories spun from the discovery at the side of the road, the most important questions remained. Without the power of modern DNA, Princess Blue was still a stranger in her own story, her identity lost, her voice silenced, her memory lingering in the twilight between hope and despair. The rings, blue stone and class band, lay side by side in a police evidence box, like silent sentinels, daring someone to piece together the truth. And so the legend of Princess Blue grew, as if the jewelry whispered in the dark. Remember me. Nearly 20 years crawled by. Years measured not in days, but in unanswered questions, unopened birthday cards, and the slow fading of faces from memory. Houston's skyline grew taller. The city's neighborhoods changed, and children who once peered at Melissa's missing posters were now grown, living their own lives with only a ghost of a story lingering in the back of their minds. Yet for the Carter family, time had not dulled the ache of loss or the gnawing need for truth. Melissa's mother, now older and grayer, never stopped keeping the blue ring's memory alive, refusing to let the world bury her daughter a second time. Science, too, changed with the years. Advances in forensic technology, particularly DNA testing, gave cold cases a second chance. Files once relegated to the back of evidence rooms were pulled forward. Princess Blue's case, marked by the haunting ring and the unidentified bones, found new life in the hands of investigators who believed that the past could still speak. In a sterile lab lit by humming fluorescent lights, technicians opened the evidence boxes that had gathered dust for decades. They worked with reverence, aware of the weight their work carried. Bone fragments were carefully prepared, tiny samples extracted from the long silent remains. Across the city, a new kind of hope flickered in the Carter home, a cautious hope, tempered by years of disappointment, but hope nonetheless. Melissa's mother submitted her own DNA, a swab on the inside of her cheek, as if the act alone might be a lifeline cast backward through time. The weeks of waiting were excruciating. Each day stretched on, nerves drawn tight. At night, Melissa's mother found herself staring at old photographs, tracing her daughter's smile with a trembling finger, wondering if after all these years, there would finally be peace. Her younger daughter, now an adult herself, returned home for visits, the two women keeping watch together, silent sentinels of memory and grief. Then the call came. Not in the dramatic fashion of television dramas, but quietly, almost apologetically. A detective's voice cracked over the phone, carrying the weight of 2 decades and an entire family's longing. The results were in. The bone samples taken from the Manvel roadside, when compared with her mother's DNA, matched. After all this time, the truth could no longer hide in shadows. Princess Blue was Melissa Carter. For a long moment, the news fell like a heavy stone into a deep well. The world seemed to pause. Melissa's mother covered her mouth, unable to speak, and then sobs broke through, a mixture of grief and relief, heartbreak and a tiny sliver of closure. Her younger daughter sat down hard on the edge of the bed, tears sliding down her cheeks, finally able to answer the question that had shaped her childhood. The family's private agony became real, undeniable, and at last, shared with the world. The case that had drifted for years was suddenly raw and immediate again. In the police station, detectives stared at old files with fresh intensity, Questions that had lain dormant returned, more insistent than ever. Who left Melissa on the roadside all those years ago? Was it the Camaro driver? Someone else entirely? What secrets lay hidden in the silence between midnight and morning, in that patch of weeds and wildflowers where her life had ended? Investigators revisited the timeline, cross-checking witness statements, combing through every scrap of evidence, re-interviewing people who had grown older, moved away, or tried to forget. The blue Camaro, once a local legend, was traced through old DMV records. The man who'd been questioned long ago had moved out of state, started over. Detectives sought him out, hoping that time and guilt might finally pry loose a confession or a clue. But his answers were the same, measured, emotionless, airtight. The wall of silence he'd built held firm, just as it had decades before. Yet the identification of Melissa's remains shifted the community. News spread fast. Old neighbors, now scattered across Texas, remembered the missing flyers, the candlelight vigils, the hope that refused to die. The story of Princess Blue was no longer just a mystery. It was a daughter, a sister, a friend. Strangers sent letters to the Carter family, sharing stories of their own lost loved ones, their own years of waiting and wondering. In the Carter household, the blue ring, returned by police with her other belongings, was placed on the altar once more, this time as a memorial rather than a beacon. The family gathered, candles flickering as dusk settled over Houston. In the soft glow, they shared memories of Melissa, stories that had been too painful to voice for so long. Her laugh, her dreams, the stubborn hope she carried like a secret. The house was filled with both sorrow and love, a tapestry of grief woven through with the relief of finally knowing. But peace was not complete. The question of justice remained, sharper now than ever. Who had stolen Melissa's life? Who had driven down that lonely highway and left her to become a whisper in the weeds? The blue Camaro lingered in everyone's minds, but no evidence could prove what happened that night. The haunting possibility remained that the person responsible still walked free, carrying the truth in silence. As the case drew new attention, rumors swirled and theories multiplied. The Carter family, having waited so long for answers, found themselves in the spotlight once again. Faces on the evening news, voices in a national conversation about justice for the forgotten. But the truest closure remained elusive, a promise hovering at the edge of every headline and every prayer. The story of Melissa Carter, once Princess Blue, became a rallying cry, a symbol of the many lost and unidentified who deserved to be found, and for whom the truth was the only true memorial. As the dust of media attention began to settle, the Carter family's grief merged with a larger, quieter sorrow that stretched far beyond Houston. Melissa Carter's case, her disappearance, the long years of not knowing, the heartbreaking identification, was no longer just a private tragedy. It became a chapter in the larger, unfinished story of America's lost daughters, a name among thousands, each with a life cut short and a legacy of questions left behind. The truth, however, was that Melissa's case was never only hers. It echoed the heartbreak and hope found in the real-life mystery of Princess Blue. In the early autumn of 1990, as the city braced for another storm season, another set of remains had been found along a lonely roadside outside Manvel, Texas, a body reduced to bone, accompanied by the now infamous blue ring and a class ring from 1975. For decades, this case would haunt both families and investigators, its clues as persistent and enigmatic as the Texas wind. Behind the scenes, detectives and forensic experts poured their lives into the puzzle. The mystery of Princess Blue became a case study in how time, silence, and technology shape the search for truth. Her story, at first little more than a headline, grew into a symbol for the nameless, a ghost who would not rest until her identity was restored. As the years passed, advances in science shifted the landscape of hope. DNA databases expanded, driven by the efforts of families unwilling to forget, and the relentless work of those who believed that even the oldest cold cases deserved a second chance. It was not just about finding the killer or even solving the case. It was about restoring a name to the lost, about granting dignity and peace to those who had been left behind. In the fictional retelling, Melissa Carter's family waited nearly 2 decades for a breakthrough. In reality, the family of Julie Gwen Davis would wait almost 30 years for a name to be restored to the woman once known only as Princess Blue. The blue ring, so ordinary, so deeply personal, became a symbol of the human connections that refused to be erased by violence or neglect. For law enforcement, the case remained a haunting reminder of limits and responsibilities. Detectives who had retired passed the file to younger hands, each new investigator poring over weathered reports, faded photos, and evidence boxes sealed with hope and despair in equal measure. They scoured old records, followed the faintest threads of rumor, and revisited every fragment of the original investigation. But the years had stripped the case of easy answers, memories faltered, witnesses moved away, and evidence grew thin and brittle. Yet there were moments of hope. Each year, on the anniversary of Princess Blue's discovery, communities gathered to light candles and share stories. Their voices joined in a promise never to let her memory fade. Families of the missing stood shoulder to shoulder, their grief a silent bond, their hope a fierce and stubborn flame. The internet, too, changed the search for the missing. Forums, databases, and amateur sleuths scoured yearbooks, mapped timelines, and shared clues that sometimes slipped through official channels. It was a patchwork effort, but sometimes it made all the difference. In the end, it was the marriage of science and stubborn love that brought answers, the DNA that proved what the blue ring had hinted at all along. Julie Gwen Davis, like Melissa Carter, had dreams that never had a chance to bloom. She was loved, she was missed, and the hole she left behind could never truly be filled. Her identification brought a bittersweet closure to those who had waited so long, but it also underscored the larger truth. The cause of death remained undetermined, and the question of justice, who had stolen her life and why, remained unanswered. The story, for all its twists and revelations, ended not with a verdict, but with a plea. In telling Melissa's story, and in remembering Princess Blue, the narrative did not just honor one lost woman, it honored them all. The countless young women whose disappearances never made headlines, the families who sat vigil through decades of silence, the investigators who refused to let the trail grow cold. Their struggles wove together into a tapestry of resilience and remembrance. The Carter family, like the family of Julie Gwen Davis, emerged from the darkness forever changed. They carried the pain of not knowing for years, endured the harsh glare of sudden media attention, and finally faced the strange emptiness that comes when a question is finally answered, but not truly resolved. They learned that grief evolves but never really ends, that closure is a myth for those who have loved and lost, that justice is sometimes just the dignity of a name, returned at last to the missing. And so the case lingered in the public consciousness, a cold reminder that every unsolved crime is a wound in the heart of a community. The Blue Ring, Princess Blue's legacy, became a silent rallying cry to keep searching, to keep caring, to never forget those who vanished along life's dark highways. It was a lesson that the world could not afford to ignore, one whispered in every candlelit vigil, printed in every newspaper article, and grieved for in every family photo left behind. Time passes, but the ache of loss never truly leaves. For nearly 3 decades, the Carter family, like so many others, walked a delicate line between hope and heartbreak. They became experts at waiting, holding on to small rituals, a blue ring placed gently on the family altar each year, candles lit in memory, photographs lovingly dusted and displayed. The world outside their apartment changed. Children grew up, new towers rose above Houston's skyline, old neighbors moved away. But inside, Melissa's absence was as vivid as the day she vanished. When the call finally came, when science gave Melissa her name back and allowed the family to mourn her openly, a strange quiet settled over the Carter home. It was the silence of a wound that would never close, but also the relief of finally being able to say goodbye. Grief did not disappear. It shifted from the chaos of uncertainty to the deep, cold ache of knowing. Melissa's room was no longer a shrine of waiting, but a gallery of memory. Her sketches pinned on the walls, her favorite dress draped across the bed, her sewing machine now a vessel for tears. The city, too, paused to honor her. At a memorial service held in a sunlit church, friends, family, and strangers gathered to share stories, some joyful, some sorrowful, all colored by the knowledge of how much promise was lost. Her mother spoke with a trembling voice about Melissa's kindness and creativity, her stubborn ambition, her love for beauty and simple things. Her sister shared quiet memories of bedtime stories, secret handshakes, and the way Melissa always seemed to believe in her, no matter what. There was laughter as well as tears, a celebration of a young woman whose life was stolen, but whose spirit endured. For the Carter family, Melissa's identification brought a bittersweet kind of peace. They finally knew where she was laid to rest. They could visit her grave, leave flowers, and whisper prayers into the wind. But the shadow of justice remained. Her killer had never been found. Her final moments left only to speculation and nightmares. The blue ring, returned to her mother by the police, became a sacred relic, something to hold on to when the darkness threatened to overwhelm, a reminder that Melissa's story had been heard, even if her case was never truly closed. In the years that followed, the Carter family became advocates for the missing, joining others whose loved ones had been stolen by violence or vanished into the vast, indifferent world. They attended vigils, spoke at community events, and worked to support new technologies in law enforcement. They understood that their loss was not unique, and in that hard truth they found strength, a bond shared with families across the country, all waiting, all hoping, all refusing to let go. The lesson of Melissa's life, and the lives of so many like her, was not just about caution or the dangers lurking in the night. It was about love, the fierce, stubborn love that refuses to be erased by tragedy. It was about the importance of bearing witness, of demanding answers, of never letting a name become just another cold statistic. For every Melissa Carter and every Princess Blue, there were hundreds more whose stories had yet to be told, whose families needed the comfort of knowing that someone cared enough to keep searching. On the anniversary of her identification, Melissa's family gathered with friends old and new. They lit candles in her memory, the flames flickering against the evening sky. Each candle was a promise, a vow that her life, though cut short, would continue to inspire action, to fuel hope, and to keep the search alive for justice and for the missing. Her mother placed the blue ring on the altar one last time, the stone catching the candlelight, glowing softly in the dark. It was both an offering and a challenge, a call for the community to remember, to care, to act. Across Houston and in towns and cities far beyond, Melissa's story left ripples. Law enforcement renewed their commitment to cold cases. New leads were followed, old evidence re-examined, and families of the missing reached out to one another, forming a network of support. Journalists revisited long-forgotten files, shining a light into the corners where stories like Melissa's had been hidden for too long. And quietly, something else changed. More people became aware of the signs of trouble. A young woman walking home alone, a stranger offering a ride, a friend who didn't answer her phone. The lesson was not to be paralyzed by fear, but to look out for one another, to speak up when something felt wrong, to report missing loved ones immediately and demand action from those in power. The community became just a little closer, a little more vigilant, carrying the knowledge that tragedy could strike anywhere, but that compassion and determination could make a difference. As the years stretched on, Melissa Carter's story remained, no longer just a mystery, but a legacy. Her dreams had not had the chance to bloom, but her memory became a seed planted in the hearts of all who heard her story. She was more than a headline, more than a cold case file, more than Princess Blue. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a young woman whose life mattered and whose story would be told again and again. In the end, the lesson was clear. Some wounds can only be healed by the truth. Some stories demand to be remembered. Some lights, once lit, refuse to go out. And so, as Melissa's family urged those gathered at her memorial and those listening far beyond, subscribe and join us in keeping memories alive and seeking justice for stories without an ending. With every telling, the blue ring shines a little brighter, a beacon in the darkness, an eternal promise that those who are lost are never forgotten.